There is so much chaos and joy and wonder and mystery in play that it just intrigues me. And as you know by now, there's nothing intrigues me more than a story, a good story. And Luke, in that second chapter, tells a really good one that grasps our attention. That said, I resisted temptation because I wanted to keep some consistent thread going. When you start a series, you try to follow that through as much as possible. Last week we talked, if you remember, a little bit about this wondrous prayer. People had asked Jesus how they should pray, and Jesus taught them this model prayer. It was fascinating because those who were listening to Jesus heard him say to whom they should pray. Abba in heaven. One with whom we can be so intimate as to utter Abba, Mama, Dada. And yet one who is in heaven. And if you remember, we said that perhaps Jesus was not saying so much where God was, but what God was. God was all present and heaven is all present. We just have difficulty sometimes realizing that the presence of God abides within us and surrounds us all the time. One who is the ultimate source and sustainer of everyone. The one next to us and the one beyond us. So after being introduced to God in this way, how do we interact with this God? Intimate and beyond. The first petition gives us just a clue. Hallowed be your name. This position is suggesting out of the gate that we consider before God, this God who is intimate and beyond, priorities. Now, almost anyone who would consider any god or goddess in the history of mythology would know that that's true. That if some God is worthy of our acknowledging the being as God, then we know that there are certain priorities that we need to consider. Remember, the first commandment, the Decalogue, you shall have no other gods. Jesus would kind of add to that as a good Jewish rabbi in the stream of rabbinic history when Jesus said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul and strength. Hallowing God as the one within all things and behind all things. Hallowing means, functionally speaking, let's get past the esoteric. Hallowing, functionally speaking, means lifting the whole of our lives up to God and asking for God to do with those lives what God did with the cosmos in the beginning. Take the chaos of the multiplicity of our lives, and we are complicated people. Somebody would say to me, "Oh, I'm just a simple soul preacher." And I've heard preachers say, "Oh, I'm just a simple country preacher." And I can't say in this space what it is that I usually mutter under my breath when they say that. No one is a simple person. No preacher is a simple preacher. We are complicated beings. And if we believe otherwise, then we are clueless about how complicated we really are. Complicated in terms of values that we profess to believe, values by which we live, complicated by relationships that we choose to uphold, complicated by relationships we choose to let go of. When we pray this prayer, hallowed be thy name, we're saying to God, hey, help us get a grip. And help us bring some clarity out of this chaos that is our lives. It is a request that God show us to love the many realities in our lives appropriately. We get so busy sorting out stuff we don't like, sometimes we don't understand that we are who we are, and even the stuff we may not like is a part of who we are and is worthy of our love and worthy of our honor. Take a look at, there's a passage in Chronicles. A guy named Ornan had a field. First, he's out working, minding his own business, thinks he sees an angel and he keeps working. Well, when I read that passage, I just start laughing like, oh, I'm just working. I look up, there's an angel coming, but I'm back to what I'm doing. And then David comes. All right? And when David comes, Ornan goes and offers to David his property, his life, how he makes a living. David says, no, I want your property, but I'm going to pay you for it fairly. That's what happens when the king controls the presses. You know, you get good light shed upon what your intentions are. But Ornan comes and bows down, willing to give everything that sustains him to this king. It's obedience, honoring God by offering ourselves and who we are and what we have. Jesus is teaching that the hallowing is discerning what we should bow down to or whom we should bow down to. And what we should stand up to, or whom we should stand up to. What we should cherish, and what we should ignore as just the trivia. Nothing is quite as important as what it is or who it is that we value. What is the mechanism behind it all that leads us to those values? I remember this. This happened. You know what happens when you get old? You lose track. A story that used to take place 10 years ago, now in reality happened probably 35 years ago. It doesn't matter. These teens broke into the store in New Jersey, and I remember reading about this. I thought this was so, I know they broke the law, but there's something funny about this. They didn't really steal anything. They broke into the store and they took price tags and they changed all the price tags around. And of course, it cost the store considerable money because they had to close the doors to try to straighten out the price tags. For instance, there was a refrigerator, and I kind of wrote this down as I went back and looked at the story. There was a refrigerator selling for 99 cents. And there were hairpins on sale for $350. The relationship, you understand, between the price and the value had gotten distorted by these pranksters. Jesus' prayer, forgive them, when he was from the cross. They don't know what they're doing. That describes us most of the time. We don't really know what we're doing in terms of what we value and what is truly of worth. There's that book, and I'm sure that all of you read it at some point, but it was the staple back decades ago, prior to the Civil War when I did youth ministry. Hope for the Flowers. Any of you remember Hope for the Flowers? Trina Paulus. There, Dolores. That's better than a TED Talk. You need to get that little book. Stripe, the caterpillar, who's on his way. He's in a journey, and he comes to this big mountain, and he's going to climb the mountain. Along the way, however, he meets Yellow, and he falls in love. And we know what happens when we fall in love. We get confused. And he was temporarily sidelined. But then he was drawn back to the mountain. And he climbs and climbs and climbs. And when he gets close to the top, a caterpillar's coming down. And he hears the worst kind of news possible. There's nothing up here. You see, he had what was really valuable. He had the love of Yellow. Now there's a happy ending, but I'm going to let you go find that little book. He didn't realize in the journey what was really important in life. He was just on his way up the mountain no matter what. We seldom get it. We seldom do. We seldom get that sometimes on our journeys we come to the conclusion after a while there's not really anything here. We seldom get that what we hallow is often unworthy. One of my old heroes, Carl I. Marney, made this twist on translating the 37th Psalm. In the New Revised Standard Version, the 37th Psalm reads like this: "Take delight in the Lord, and God will give you the desires of your heart." Marney did a paraphrase. Open yourselves in delight to God, and God will fix your wanter. Now you know where the confession stuff comes from. The prodigal son, he knew what he wanted, even if it meant he had to wish his old man dead. But what he wanted and what he valued was, when all said and done, not anything that was going to sustain him, because he was confused about what was worth his commitments. And when he finally came to himself, as Jesus told the story, he realized what was important. It wasn't just he was hungry, but he turned and went back home, even if it meant he had to feed the pigs. The prodigal son needed to have God fix his wanter. And when we pray this prayer, hallowed be thy name, your name, it means that we're willing and praying to God to fix our wanter, to help us know what's true to honor, what's true to love, what's true in our journey to trust. It is saying, Abba, my priorities are a mess. Fix my wanter. But our question always is, do we want our wanter fixed? What's true for the individual is also true for the societies we build. What we claim to want and what we claim to believe is valuable. I wrote a newsletter article years ago in Dallas when Dale Earnhardt died, the race car driver, because, of course, having grown up in the country I grew up in, and many of my friends come out of the NASCAR mentality, you would think the world had come to end. And I wrote this piece reflecting in no way negative about this man's life, but lifting up the issue, why is it that when someone like Dale Earnhardt dies, the nation goes into this great shock and trauma of someone who basically is involved in entertainment, who's died. But when a teacher dies, Very few people ever know about it. Why is it that we live in a country where teachers have to scrape and spend their own money to educate kids who so badly need to learn how to read and learn how to function in society? But entertainers, sports people who are nothing but entertainers, get paid exorbitant amounts of money, and some of them, by the way, who do it so badly, and they get paid a fortune. And by the way, while this preacher's meddling and gotten off track of preaching, why is it that our children, many of them across our land, have no basic health care provided for them or coverage, while the people who are setting policy have incredible health care policies? Why is that? When is it that our nation's going to get a sense to pray out to God, please, God, fix our wanters because our values are a mess? Okay, I've quit meddling now. Settle back down. We can pray the prayer, Abba in heaven. But when we get to saying, hallowed be your name, we're praying that prayer asking for healing to begin, clarity to come from the chaos, love to move past the hate, grace more substantial than judgment. Dare we pray the prayer today? Hallowed be your name. Significant question as we celebrate the birthday of the church.